6, Michigan. Forward!
Sailor! Charge! Ready! Aim! Fire!
Errol Flynn as George Armstrong Custer, I think, is one of those rare cases of pretty close to ideal casting. The image of Custer, of course, that has survived is that he was this flamboyant character. He was brave to the point of being foolhardy. He was cavalier. He was careless, but he was dashing and romantic. Those are adjectives that people use for Errol Flynn, too. And by all accounts, Custer was a very dashing figure. He was tall. He was very handsome for that day. Of course, he had a big handlebar mustache, which they happily lost in the Errol Flynn version of it.
This film probably is as historically inaccurate as it could possibly be. I know there's a scene at the beginning where he arrives at school at the military academy, you know, kind of with a servant carrying his luggage, and he's on a horse and everything like that. Well, the real Custer was there on a scholarship. He had no money and was a very poor boy. In this movie, there's a scene where just before he goes off into battle, he takes a drink. And he's kind of a teetotaler till then.
Remember I told you once that I took a drink? You could open the bar up? Yeah. Well, I feel like drinking tonight.
In real life, Custer was an alcoholic that actually gave up drinking at that point and never had another one. So, I mean, all through the movie, there are things that are cockeyed. But, again, it was not a history lesson. It was a movie.
So if you go in there expecting to see a accurate rendition of the life of George Armstrong Custer and his lovely wife, forget it. It's kind of a romantic pastiche of the whole thing.
They wanted to portray Errol Flynn here as Custer, as this headstrong person, hell-bent for glory, and he's going to achieve his destiny no matter what. And that's part of the joy of this movie, I think. There's a kind of a strong, powerful thrust to it. It just keeps thrusting forward, almost like a cavalry charge.
Come on, man! Forward!
Many people don't notice, but the first half of the movie is played for comedy.
Mr. Custer. Yes, sir. You know how many fragments will a 12-pound shell burst?
Certainly not less than 2, sir.
There's a lot of humor in the first part, but then, of course, it gets dark and darker until finally the inevitable climax.
Unfortunately, they couldn't change the ending. Not even Errol Flynn could win the Battle of Little Bighorn.
I think part of the success of Flynn in that particular role was how he carried off the evolution of the character from this sort of callow young cadet at West Point to a man with a conscience. You see a maturity there develop as the part goes on. That is, I believe, Errol Flynn's most winning performance of all of his movies. It was intended that the Flynn-Curtiz collaboration would continue what they did with their boots on. They had just finished Dive Bomber, and there was tremendous tension on the set between them.
Errol did not want to work with Mike Curtiz anymore after Dive Bomber, and he just said, that's it.
And at this point, Errol Flynn was powerful enough that he could have something to say about it. So in this case, they let him have his way.
Well, he liked Raoul Walsh's work. Walsh had just come to Warner's a short time before, but he had done The Roaring Twenties, he had done A Drive-By Night, he had done some pictures that were quite popular and very well done.
Raoul Walsh was one of the most colorful figures among directors in Hollywood, and that includes a lot of colorful figures. Raoul Walsh lost an eye shooting a film in old Arizona, so he always wore the eye patch. It sort of fit him because he was a tough-looking guy who amazingly could direct a love scene very well, too. He was an all-around director.
And he and Flynn hit it off, and they became buddies.
Flynn always called him Uncle. He had that tremendous affection for Raoul Walsh. And Raoul Walsh always said that I felt Errol Flynn was my son.
He was a craftsman, and he worked hard and so forth, but he was the antithesis of Mike Curtiz.
Jack Warner made one of his wiser moves, I think, when he brought in Raoul Walsh to direct Flynn.
The regiment rides in about an hour. You can ride with it if you want. Where is the regiment riding? To hell, Sharp. Or to glory. It depends on one's point of view.
Well, now, for They Die With Their Boots On, Max Steiner, who was the workhorse of the Warner Music Department, was definitely set to score the film. He had been with Warner since 1936, and he always incorporated material that would be right for the times.
I've cursed you regularly. Every time I tried to think of that confounded song. What was the name of it?
Oh, Gary Owen.
The Gary Owen.
Gary Owen.
Gary Owen.
Come along here. Play it for us. Excuse me, gentlemen. This is an important song.
Oh, we can dare and we can do, united men and brothers true.
This was the drinking song of the 7th Cavalry of George Custer. And it's a very catchy tune, and it runs all the way through the movie, right from the opening credits.
Hello, Roberts. How's your wife? Better, sir. Thanks to Mrs. Custer. Good, good. Now look, tomorrow...
The second musical theme that runs through the film is a beautiful, beautiful love theme. It's haunting.
Stand over there. Let me look at you. My word, you're lovelier than ever.
They Died With Their Boots On was the last co-starring of Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland.
Aren't you happy here, Mr. Custer?
Mrs. Custer, I've never been so happy in my life.
And there's a touching ending in the film where Custer is going off the Little Bighorn.
There's a tremendous poignancy to that final parting scene between Errol and Olivia. It partly goes back to the line that he speaks to her the first time they meet.
Well, I can't imagine, ma'am, if I may say so, any pleasanter journey, ma'am, than walking through life with you beside me, ma'am. I must go now.
And of course, at the end, the inevitable has happened. The morning has come. He's marching off to his death. They both know it. And they stare into each other's eyes, and he speaks those words to her now in this very moving way.
Walking through life with you, ma'am, has been a very gracious thing.
And you almost don't want him to leave the room. You want to reach out and hold him, don't you, to keep him there in that moment. And both Errol and Olivia in that scene, I think, are so beautifully understated. It's underplayed, and that way it's more effective. And it's also poignant because that was their last scene together that they would ever make, that they would ever film in any movie, and they both knew it.
And they had such a history together. They'd made so many movies together. And Olivia said she instinctively knew that they would never work together again, and they never did. So it's a very poignant movie from the standpoint that, starting with Captain Blood and going through all those other films, that here is the last of the movies that this great team and two people who really adored each other, the last time they would work together.
You have been happy here, haven't you, Lily?
Don't I look happy?
So, indeed, that was it. That was the final curtain for Errol and Olivia in their co-starring heyday.
When you think of the most famous screen teams in film history, male and female, I don't think you need think any further than Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland. Sometimes it's impossible to think of the one without also thinking of the other. They just went together.